Okay, so based on what we've got so far, we've narrowed down pretty strictly. We have an actual confirmed lean condition that gets worse under load. So now one of the things we can do based on this, we know we've got a fuel deficit issue. Either we have a lack of fuel delivery despite the pressure being good, maybe the injectors aren't working to their full potential. Fuel pressure, again, we're within spec and it improved under load, so I'm not worried about that too much. Another thing, of course, would be a mass airflow sensor, and it would be out of calibration. The problem is I need baseline information at idle and under load to know what that should be. And fuel pressure goes on here because it's an explanation, but we have ruled that out. But what we have not ruled out is the injector balance, of course. What else could cause this? Oh, again, bad O2 sensors. Okay. But again, we confirmed that they are accurately reporting a true lean condition because we woke them up by inducing a lean variable, or I'm sorry, a rich variable, by inducing a rich variable, and they responded appropriately. Another problem could be EGR. This especially would explain at an idle condition, us having a really bad idle, but then it smooths out under load, that's for sure. Less likely, and we didn't check that, so actually this is a good reason why we do this dry erase board of knowledge. That we need to check on. Now I would expect if we have a bad EGR, we wouldn't see the fuel trims getting worse under load. So the EGR not quite as likely, but we should go ahead and see if we can check EGR position. And I think I did, yeah, we have a diagnosis and understanding video on EGR, so I don't really have to go into what I'm doing there. We can do our homework on that. So that is still a possibility. As you can see, even though we've narrowed down to a specific path, we still have a lot of variables to consider. But another one is a plugged exhaust. It really coincides with the low MAF reading and the bad idle. The only trouble is that the engine seems to do a lot better when we go under load. And I haven't driven the car yet. I think we may need to do that. This good way to check that would be, of course, an exhaust back pressure test. But another way would be if I drive the car, we can look at the fuel trims. I would expect in this car, the fuel trims are going to go way lean when I floor the car. And if that happens, then I'm going to pretty much rule out a plugged exhaust. But I'm pretty confident that that's what would happen here. And I don't know if this will even show up in the camera, but an ignition problem, I suppose, could cause this. That's very unlikely, but we're going to leave that as a last possibility. But boy, right now, a mass airflow sensor really seems to be the biggest candidate. So again, when using a diagnostic procedure, you certainly want to go to what your likeliest candidates are, although that didn't work so well for us in this video, but it's still the way to do it. It's, you just keep on going until you get it. But the point is that we haven't changed any parts yet. But what we want to do is go for what the easiest thing is, and that would be, I think, to check the EGR. So let's go ahead and do that next. Oh, and I forgot one other thing. Of course, we weren't able to test the MAP sensor. That is also a possibility as well. I was just thinking about that while I was booting my scan tool up. Oh, and I was just thinking of another one, idle air control. We haven't considered. Now, I'm less likely to be inclined to believe that's a problem because we can hear that the idle air control is actually trying to help our problem. But we remember from my Trans Am video a while back that we can have fuel problems with an idle air control motor. It might not be in the right position or whatever. But we've got a lot of stuff to look at here. We need to come up with a quicker way of doing this. So let me think what I can do here. So what I'm going to do is see if I can get lucky here. Very seldom do these bidirectional controls work, but I want to see if we can verify that we're getting movement of EGR. And I got an error on here, so I am not going to be able to do that. We would have to manually apply voltage to the EGR. I show how to do that in a video, the diagnosis and understanding EGR. Based on the location of EGR with this, I do not feel like getting my hands burned off. So we have a lot of variables. A lot of them we would have to test manually, which we've done in other videos anyway. The car is about to die right now. We need to come up with a better strategy than ruling out all these variables and doing a kind of a process of elimination. So let's revisit our board. So here's the thing. We could go through and do an injector balance test, an IAC test, all the stuff we've done in other videos. If this were one of my earlier videos, I would have done that just to show the procedures. I've already done that multiple times in some cases, as a matter of fact. So what's going to happen now is, because we're more realistic here, it's going to be easier for me to do some research and find out about this concern that we have with our top priority, our top suspect, than it would be to do a diagnosis by exclusion and eliminate everything except the one thing it could be. It's just going to be actually more time effective to get on the computer and do some homework. And to be honest with you, when I'm not filming the cars that I'm working on, that's actually the way I do it. I spend as much time, if not more, doing research on the computer than I do just taking stuff apart and testing everything. It's a more efficient way of doing it. So let me go ahead and do that and see what I can find. All right, after a rather diligent attempt at finding some specifications for the mass sensor, I came up blank. And mind you, that in my real job, if you think that I don't spend a considerable amount of time trying to find evidence that other people have found in the past, that's basically what I do for a living. So here's the problem here is that if this was 2 years ago when I was starting off this channel, I would be thrilled at the idea of doing all these cool tests and everything. The thing is, we've already done them before. I've got videos on them. What I want to do is something different. I want to come up with a quicker way of doing this than excluding all these possibilities. By the way, there could also be some possibilities I'm overlooking, and some of you guys are probably screaming at your screen. In this case, I wish I could hear you because I can't think of too many other ideas. I just don't want to go through a big process of elimination. So actually, here's what happened. My girlfriend brought me lunch. I got to sit down for a little bit, as usual, when you walk away from things a little bit, kind of mull it over in your mind and stuff. And I actually kind of came up with an idea here. We're overlooking something. We're overlooking something very big. And that is, you've got to remember, our fuel trims are maxed out. So what's the first thing that I eliminated right off the bat? A vacuum leak was the first thing we eliminated because of the behavior of the fuel trims. But it got to my thinking, I made the mistake again of not considering the short-term fuel trim, and our vacuum leak data may not actually be accurate because fuel trim was maxed out. Again, whenever you do fuel trims, and I apologize, I'm doing a terrible job of it in this video, but whenever you do fuel trim analysis, remember, when you look at the long-term fuel trim, you're always looking into the past at stuff that's already been adjusted for, but your short-term fuel trim gives you your live, actual correction that's happening, and we didn't do that when we eliminated the vacuum leak possibility. It's possible the short-term fuel trim could be compensating, but the thing is that, again, I made the mistake. We need to look at total fuel trim. That would be the combination of your long-term fuel trim number and adding your short-term fuel trim number. So if the short-term fuel trim is positive, then you've got a much greater total number, and we actually saw that at idle. Okay, but we didn't check that under load. If the short-term fuel trim runs negative, then that would strongly subtract from that long-term fuel trim number. We did not do that. So rather than run through all this, here's my strategy. I want to find something that makes that short-term fuel trim drop, and that would be indication we're on the right path. So I want to do something that will create a short-term fuel trim correction that would ultimately bring down that long-term fuel trim. That's how we know we'll be on the right path. And I'm going to be checking that when I do any of these other things if we get to there. But the strategy is, let's go ahead and repeat our fuel trim with load, but look at total fuel trim just to make sure that we can rule out a vacuum leak, because again, we made the mistake that we are working with a maxed out fuel trim that nullifies the result that we got initially here. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring up short-term fuel trim again, and we know that this is going to be maxed out because we're at idle here. And then also let's bring up engine speed. And again, this is our consideration. Again, while we don't make a diagnosis off symptoms, we still consider them in our direction. Remember, the direction that the symptoms would lead us would be to a vacuum leak with the poor idle, but it improves under load. We dismiss the vacuum leak because of the long-term fuel trim data, but again, we have to include the right data. We need all the data, and we didn't do it properly. We didn't include total fuel trim. So let's see, we've got engine RPM in blue, and then red is going to be long-term, green way up at the top, short-term. So let's go ahead and see if we can verify that maybe we do have a vacuum leak here. Okay. How about that? Dramatic. Oh, the engine's going to die. Okay, I made a crucial mistake earlier, didn't I? Again, the lesson here, when you do your data acquisition, you've got to get all the data. Let's do that one more time. Okay, we can see we definitely get a dramatic improvement on the short-term fuel trim. Let's see how low we can get it. I want to actually see if we can get it to go to 0 maybe. Okay, look at that. Yeah, I made a definite mistake, didn't I? Yeah, my engine's about to go. It doesn't like recovering from that, does it? But the mistake I made, we were considering long-term fuel trim only and not total fuel trim. Notice that the long-term fuel trim dramatically improved also as the short-term pulled it down. We have a vacuum leak, I believe, which is great. I was prepared to do this testing with all the other variables, but I made a dire mistake not including the short-term fuel trim, especially when considering a maxed out long-term. Wow, sorry, long way to go. But again, like I said, I'm still learning and I don't do this professionally. Now you know why, but we are definitely on to something. So let's go find this vacuum leak and fix this car. Okay, since I already had the propane out because we were testing the O2 sensors, and considering how bad this vacuum leak must be to cause these symptoms, I should be able to find it with the propane. So I go anywhere after the mass airflow sensor, any of the vacuum lines and everything, and along the intake. That's a real big one here. Okay, I think I finally found something here. Let's take a listen. Right there you hear the idle change. Ooh, a lot. It likes that. Let's take it away. And you hear the engine's about to die. Okay, so we got a leak back there. Oh my God. All right, I see what the problem is. Yeah, I don't know whether I should feel like a genius or an idiot here, but let me show you. All right, we have an open port on the intake manifold that hose obviously goes to. Let's see if we can find that hose. Right here. Actually, okay, so it's connected to an evap line right here. Look at the split in the hose. So just that simple. I bet this fixes it. Let's go ahead and replace this hose. And actually, here's what I'm going to do. Let me just put my finger over that hole, and let's watch that the idle improves, and that would be a verification. This is our fix. Okay, let's just see if I can fit my finger over the port. Listen to that idle change. Just about kill the engine. All right. And we can hear it starting to stable out. Let's check our fuel trims when we do that and verify that they start correcting. Okay, so we got, again, long-term in red, short-term in green. Let's watch these guys correct when I go ahead and fill this vacuum leak, and that'll be evidence of the repair. And we got to let the engine not die. All right, it's starting to correct now. Look at that green short term just racing down. And of course the engine's going to run a little poorly while it corrects. Eventually we're going to get that long term to start pulling down. But look at that. Look at that. That is a fix. So I just need to replace that hose is all. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. I mean, this is obviously enough. Look at the short terms going negative. Love it. How simple a problem, but kind of a complicated diagnosis. I admit I really got thrown off with the maxed out fuel trim. Hey, let's look at our oxygen sensors too. because most people would have put 2 oxygen sensors into this vehicle thinking that was the problem. But again, all of the stuff that we thought was suspicious is accurately reporting the problem. There's our O2 sensor oscillation, and that is good. You know what? Let's check the map, or I'm sorry, the mass airflow. Do we still have that up here? Because now I'm just curious if this is actual normal spec. You know, maybe we still have a mass airflow sensor problem, but we'll find out. Okay, I think that's higher than before, isn't it? Let's look at our voltage, because I remember the voltage a little better. Oh, that looks better. That's definitely higher. I thought the voltage was 0.4 before, but the main thing is, yeah, it's possible we have, you know, 2 unrelated problems, and maybe we still have a MAF problem, but the bottom line is the engine hasn't stumbled or anything since I found this. It runs a lot better. Okay, well, I'm going to call that MAF sensor as normal. I'm not going to replace a MAF sensor based on that unless we have either evidence that we're out of spec or the customer reports any other problems, which I don't think he will, but let's wrap this thing up. That's a fix. Okay, I'm not going to lie, I got my ass kicked a little here, and I kind of deserved it because of making a simple basic mistake. I did not consider total fuel trim from the very start. The problem with using the methodological approach that we do here is that you're limited based on the data that you gather. You have to go based on the data you gather and the evidence you make from that data. When you don't have a complete data set, it will often lead you down the wrong path, and that's exactly what happened here. One little data parameter that I missed, and it basically made my decision making take me down the wrong path. We came very close to putting a mass airflow sensor into this vehicle, and it would not have fixed it, all for a simple vacuum leak that didn't present as most of them do, because the vacuum leak was so big that there wasn't the ability to adapt with the fuel trim, and it threw me off. So the lesson here is definitely always do total fuel trim analysis when you do your fuel trims. Had I done that from the very beginning, we would have found this thing in minutes instead of about 2 hours. So definitely lesson learned to me. Always total fuel trim, always. And the other thing is, you'll notice that even with the mistakes that I made, the theory, the logic, the method still works. It works every time, because ultimately you're going to get to things where they just don't make sense, and you know then that you missed a data parameter and you have to go back. So even when it doesn't work, it still works, if that makes sense. So much better than just guessing at parts. Can you imagine what a parts changer would have done with this vehicle? They would have gone nuts. So anyway, yeah, I screwed up. But anyway, pretty cool video, I think. And I definitely hope that we all learned a valuable lesson there to always do total fuel trim no matter what. And that's definitely worth, I think, putting this up there and maybe making myself look a little foolish for a simple vacuum leak. So we'll wrap this one up. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. We'll see you next time.